now.
So, good afternoon and welcome to our first live session on the midterm budget speech.
On Facebook.
On Facebook, can you believe it? Very up to technology here in Mazars. So, just to introduce myself, I'm Tertius, Troost, I'm a tax consultant at Mazars, and with me today is Mike Teuchert, National Head of Taxation, also here with Mazars. So today was quite a big day. We had the midterm budget policy statement by Minister Gigaba, and just to give us a quick overview, we have Mike. Mike, can you maybe just give me a sense of what was said, what was this all about?
Yeah, look, your midterm budget speech is more about telling everybody where we are compared to our original budget in February 2017. So this is the 2017-2018 budget, and what we're now doing is assessing where we are with regard to our collections and our spend. And that was the intention or the idea of this budget speech. It's not really a big policy statement or announcement of taxes. It's just more of, are we on the right track with regard to our original estimates? I think that the harsh one is that he's expecting that our tax shortfall is going to be close to 51 billion rand. And that's quite a big number.
Yeah, that sounds very excessive.
It is, but I think more importantly, he hasn't actually told us how he's really going to fund it, or where the money is going to come from to fund it. And the only thing one can surmise is that we're going to be extending or expanding on our borrowings. And they're already at a precarious rate. We were talking about a 3.1% total deficit versus GDP when the budget came out in February this year, and he's looking at extending that or increasing that to 4.3%.
But that's about, do quick math, that's more than a third, more than 33% increase of what they expected it to be.
Yeah, correct. So, and I think it's a function of the high shortfall that we're facing. That the tax revenues are down, and they're going to be expected to be down by 51 billion. Mm-hmm. I think in the first quarter they were already down by 15 billion. So the 50 billion rand looks like it's going to be right. Now, I think the other thing that he was, which is also a bit of a controversial side, is he's looking at recapitalizing SAA, and he's also brought in, I think it's the post office. That's going to cost about 14 billion.
And I heard that they were looking at maybe selling the Telkom shares in order to fund that.
Well, part of it's going to be funded by the sale of Telkom shares. They're talking about 3.9 billion. Mm-hmm. And the other part is they're talking about funding by reducing the contingency reserve, and that must be 10 billion.
Yes.
Contingency reserve, okay, whilst I don't know public finances extremely well, but it seems like that would be a reserve that one has where you're looking for, we as a safe harbor. Mm. So in case we underestimate our expenditure, we'll have a contingency, and now what we're doing is just reducing our margin of safety.
I mean, just here in the Western Cape, we're sitting with a water crisis issue, something that those funds maybe would need to be used for. I mean, something like this is something that can be unexpected. So decreasing that, actually, it's a bit of a risk for the country that is taking. But
correct. What he's saying is that hopefully everything goes according to plan, mm-hmm. and if it doesn't go to plan, well, we haven't got too much scope to move. So that's a bit tricky.
I mean, I've also read that the increase in the debt levels as we go along up to 2022. Would be just servicing that debt, the interest payments on that would be approximately 15% of your entire budget.
Yeah, but I think more importantly what's happened is in 2016 our spending, our debt was roughly 50%, and now we're going to 60% of GDP.
Yeah, that's also another 20% increase.
That's a 20% increase in debt, which indicates that the shortfall is just going to be funded by borrowings. Now, that 15% figure you talk about is interesting. How have they calculated it? We're in a bit of a parlous state where the rating agencies we're really in their crosshairs. They're all looking at us, and we just have one more rating agency to drop us by a notch or two, and we're in junk status.
Yeah, all of a sudden your interest
and then your debt costs are going to be higher. So whilst we're talking about 15% of your budget is going to be spent towards financing your debt or servicing your debt, that could possibly be higher.
Yeah, so have they taken the prudent approach in calculating that figure? I assume not.
Well, I don't know. Hopefully they have. Treasury is a good operation. I think there's still a lot of good people there, and I think that somewhere along the line somebody would have put that into the mix. Hopefully, but it is a risk, but at the end of the day, we're going to a point where we seem to be borrowing more, and are we able to afford it? We're actually getting ourselves into a bit of a debt trap where we won't be able to get out of this debt trap. And are we just going to be a declining country? And we don't really want to be there.
Yes, no, I hear you. So, except for that, let's take the other forms of how they can obtain money. It's either by decreasing the expenditure or increasing revenue. So there was a short sentence on they looking at increasing revenue, which would most probably take the form of tax rate increases. But there was nothing in this budget saying how it's going to do it now, and he's actually just delaying that until the 2018 budget speech in February.
Yes.
So what can we expect? Do you think?
Well, look, okay. The interesting thing is by saying we're going to increase revenue. Yes, we've got to increase taxes. He's only going to announce that in 2018. Well, the 2018-2017 budget's already gone. So that's not talking to how he's going to fund this.
And we've got the 50 billion right now.
Yeah,
okay.
So I think we've got a bit of a problem there that we still haven't got an answer how we're actually going to be funding it.
Too little, too late, it seems.
Yeah. Okay, talking about increasing revenues. Yeah, so it's taxes. What type of taxes have we got? Typically, we've got corporates. On the corporate side, we're very close to being competitive at the upper end of being competitive with other countries. If we increase that, we become uncompetitive, and you run the risk that you reduce foreign direct investment into the country.
Which we've already been seeing with some money actually being removed from the JSE by foreigners, just thinking there's too much risks. So except for the risk, if you start to increase corporate rates, people are going to say, I'm going to get less money for return to me. From my investment.
Going through the stock exchange, that's usually hot money. It does move around. But I think we're not seeing good foreign direct investment into infrastructure in this country in the form of manufacturing, yes. Setting up new businesses, etc. So if you're going to increase your corporate tax rates, you're going to discourage those investors. And the world is massive. There's a lot of jurisdictions that do offer competitive tax rates. We take the UK, which everybody would have thought would be a high tax jurisdiction. For corporates, it's less than 20% versus our 28%. They don't have dividends withholding taxes. We've got a 20% withholding tax. So if you're faced with opening up a manufacturing operation, the UK is starting to look quite attractive compared to South Africa.
Yes.
So it's tricky. I don't think corporate income tax rates, I don't think we're really going to be able to go up there.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's left? We got indirect taxes, transactional taxes, and that's typically VAT, customs, excise.
There's been a lot of speculation about a one percentage point increase in the VAT rate brings about 20 billion rand into the fiscus. But once again, nothing mentioned in this budget speech anything regarding touching the VAT rate.
Yeah, look, I think VAT is a huge political hot potato in this country, and if you compare our VAT rate to most jurisdictions, I think there are one or two other jurisdictions that have got a similar VAT rate, but most jurisdictions are sitting above 19%. So we have got a VAT rate that is relatively low, but politically, it's just, I don't think it's going to ever happen in this country. Well, it's not going to happen it wouldn't have happened today.
Yes.
We've got the elective conference coming up very shortly.
In
December, and that would cast a real, put him in a bad light, or put the current government in a bad light, and it will cause COSATU to have an eruption before an elective conference. So I don't think that's going to happen. Would it happen in February? Well, you've got a national election in April 19, around there. So is that enough time to possibly increase it, and then hopefully the electorate forget in a year's time? Maybe, maybe not.
I don't think COSATU will let them forget.
No.
But there was also maybe having a tiered VAT rate, maybe having some luxury goods subject to a higher VAT rate, and keeping your other items zero rated, that that the bulk of your population would be using.
Yeah, I suppose you're increasing the basket of goods that qualify for zero rating.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was something that the Davies Committee mooted,
Mm-hmm.
and that could well work. And yes, they haven't really, that hasn't been put on the table. But then you're going to have to counter that either by increasing the VAT rate,
Mm-hmm.
or alternatively, as you're talking about, having some tiered rates.
Mm-hmm.
Now, tiered rates, you do see them in certain jurisdictions, where for your basic foodstuffs or your normal consumer goods is one rate, and then there's a higher rate for your white goods,
Mm-hmm.
Washing machines, cars, those type of things. Or luxury goods, as some people want to call them. Now, I think that's quite a difficult ask. There's a lot of system changes that's going to be required, both from commerce, business. You've got to change your computer software. You're going to have to train your staff. They're going to have to put their legislation in place to define it properly.
Mm-hmm.
And then SARS itself has to change its systems.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that process is not a quick fix.
Mm-hmm.
It's more likely going to take at least 6 months to implement, if not a year.
Okay.
So if you're going to increase your VAT if you're going to possibly use tiered rates in 2018, the effect will only come through in 2019, 20.
And then once again, as you stated, you have the 50 billion shortfall right now.
Yeah.
Having increasing or having tiered rates in that, which is only going to be implemented in another year or a year and a half, it's just going to be too much time. You need a quick fix. You need something that's going to happen now. So if you've got corporate tax rate out, you've got the VAT rate, increases in VAT rate out, what's left? Your individual.
Left with individuals.
Man on the street.
And on the street. And that is a combination of personal income tax and the various SIN taxes, road fuel levies, those type of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the moment, consumers under a huge bunch of pressure. Lots of people keep on saying, I can't pull my belt in anymore, I've run out of notches. So, so I suppose the possible gap there is, and this is something that we've always been scared of, is all of a sudden seed capital gains are taxed as normal income. Okay, so currently, just let's explain that. Currently, if you have a capital gain, 40% of that capital gain is subject to tax. And if you on a marginal tax rate of 45%, the maximum tax rate that you will incur on a capital gain would be 18%. Sorry, nearly got 16. 18%.
It changes so often.
Now, if you increase that, if you remove that exclusion rate from, if you increase it from 40%, or you decrease it from 40% down to null, there's no exclusion. It's the inclusion rate. Sorry, it's inclusion.
Yeah.
So if you remove the inclusion rate and you make it all taxable, well, you're going to be paying 45% on capital gains.
I mean, and that's just actually in South Africa, we've got just money, or you've got the inflation rate. So normally your asset should be growing by inflation. Inflation at the moment currently just below the threshold of 6%. So if, let's say, you have a capital asset that keeps growing, trying to beat inflation and trying to keep the value of your money the same that you've invested, you can be paying normal tax on just normal growth in order to stay in the same position. That sounds, that's a bit harsh.
That is harsh. And I suppose the other one, like they partially did in the current budget, where they didn't give us full relief for fiscal drag.
Yes.
So they could possibly not give us relief for fiscal drag. So that's really what we're talking about is we've got a progressive income tax system, and at certain bands, the bands of income, the tax rate increases. And the way you would then adjust for any inflation, you would increase the rebate or possibly widen the bands. And this last year, they didn't quite widen the bands or increase the rebates as much to provide for full fiscal relief or full effects of inflation. So, and this was something pre-94. What often happened is that tax rates would just be increased, but we had inflation rates then of about 15, in the 15% range. So the fiscal drag effect was huge. Luckily, we're in a low inflation environment, closer to the 6%. But it still does have an effect, and the big effect that it has is typically on your pensioners and your savers.
Yes.
Where there's not very much more they can do about their fixed income. It's going to be that amount. So so that's to me, if we are going to increase if there is going to be further taxes that are going to be extracted, it's possibly going to come out of a combination of those ones.
Yeah, that's
from individuals.
But if I'm thinking back on the February budget speech, I think that only brought in about 9 billion. I mean, we've got 50 billion shortfall. Yes,
correct. Yes,
it is something, but it's so small.
It's not big enough, and so where are we going?
So on that fact, so if you keep increasing your individual and you keep taking let's say money from the taxpayer, you've got this question of tax morality. People maybe don't want to pay their taxes because they don't feel like they're getting any benefit from the state, or the services that are being rendered are just not enough.
Well, I don't know if it's services, just that people believe that, okay, I'm a citizen of this country and I am quite comfortable in paying a certain portion of my earnings to the state.
Yes.
At some point in time, and whether it's from services or because you're benevolent and you want to improve the lot of have-nots in this country, at some point in time you might reach the point and say, but this is just not working. I'm working so hard, and all my money is going to somebody else, and I'm rewarding people that aren't working. So it becomes a bit of a fine line at what point you turn that one over. I think things like corruption, state capture, and those things don't also help the matter. I mean, I've often heard clients saying, I don't want to give any more money to this mob. I mean, that's almost saying we're in a mafiosia position. Well, there's always a question: are politicians not just another form of, So
let's leave it at that.
We don't want to quite call them the mafia.
Yeah.
But I think that we're running a close risk where people are saying, "Geez, I can't pay anymore. This is just not fair." And then that's when people possibly either leave the country or they do their own tax planning. They start doing barter transactions, cash transactions, and not declaring it. And that's somewhere we don't want to go to. SARS has really done well, and this country has done well to have a position where our people are actually willing to be part of the tax system and actually be part of the country. But we do run a risk, and we've spoken about it before in previous years, where you're almost killing this golden goose that's going to the goose that's going to lay the golden egg, and you don't want to do that. So I don't think we want to go there.
Yeah, that's another point. I think with tax morality is this Laffer curve they talk about, that when you're increasing taxes, there's as you increase taxes, there will be an increase in revenue for the country. So there's a point which they call the Laffer curve, that when you reach a point of increasing the tax rates more, you actually get a decrease in revenue, either by people leaving the country or they just don't want to pay the tax because they don't believe it's being spent well. So I think part of that, it might be closer than people believe, because we are seeing financial immigration, people leaving the country saying, I'll rather give my tax money and stay at another place where I can get better services for the money that I'm paying.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's sad to say it, but we as a firm are seeing a fair amount of our high net worth individuals that are either immigrating or are in the process of immigrating. That has another profound effect in that it starts reducing your tax base as well. So yes, you get this point in the last cycle of tax rates where you're going to reach a point where increasing the tax rates is not going to have an effect. In actual fact, it could have a negative effect.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just pray we don't get there, because that's a bad position to be in.
I agree. So before this speech, we actually saw some people picketing outside of Parliament saying no to nuclear. It's always been a very topical point of discussion. I think we saw something short about nuclear in the budget speech. Do you have any comments regarding that?
Yeah, look, it's quite interesting. We got a power utility, Eskom, and they paid a lot of attention. He paid a lot of attention in the budget speech to Eskom, saying that he needs to bolster the board, and they're going to be looking very closely at Eskom. And then he will also mention that we seem to be, we're in a position now where we've got excess capacity, and now we've got to try and offload that capacity. So we're trying to look at our bigger users, such as AluSaf and our mines and those type of people and manufacturers, and asking them how they can, somehow allowing them to take up more capacity. And then you've got the situation, and yes, we're also looking at exporting some electricity, possibly to our neighbouring countries, which is a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Then, just sort of after that, you mentioned that that our whole power generation mix will be determined by the integration power plan, and then you also mentioned that, but in the February speech, no, in the May presidential speech,
yes,
Zuma's May speech, that nuclear would still be considered.
Mm-hmm.
So it's strange. Currently we've got excess capacity, and now we're still considering nuclear. So we've got a bit of a contradiction going on there. Not sure if we do need nuclear, but it seems like if Eskom have currently got an excess, well, will it be maintained?
Mm-hmm.
And if it will be maintained, then you don't need nuclear, but there might well be a point when the economy does grow and you do need more power, that nuclear could be an option.
Okay. So I think we might have a question from some of our listeners.
So,
Listeners?
Listeners.
No, we don't have listeners.
Listeners
on radio.
Viewers. Okay.
Fellow Facebookers.
I did not watch the midterm budget speech, but how will government be assessing the way forward with the loss-making state-owned entities?
Yeah, look, the minister paid a lot of attention and spoke a lot about the SOEs. So he spoke earlier about Eskom, where he was talking about bolstering up the board. SAA, they've said they've looked at, they've just now changed the board, and they are also looking at making sure that board members are professionally qualified with the right people on those boards.
And also the post office.
Okay, then, and possibly the post office as well, it falls all within that. I think what was interesting is that he is going to throw some more money at SAA, and he's also going to throw some money at the post office.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about 14 billion combined. I think SAA was about 5 billion, if I recall correctly.
Yes, I agree.
And that's going to be funded partially by the reduction in the contingency reserve and the sale of the Telkom shares.
Yes.
The interesting thing with the Telkom shares, he's looking at selling them, but he wants them on a buyback. So, okay. Don't want to sell them really.
Yes. There was also something of maybe getting a strategic partner for SAA and maybe consolidating some of their entities. Maybe I think SAA.
Yeah, there was a one-liner or something like
yes.
that.
Yeah.
Where he was looking at what he was saying is finding a strategic partner for SAA. We have had that once before, I think, where we sold a 25% Lufthansa, wasn't it? Or I don't know, but I think we have had some.
Was that before my time?
What's your time?
So yeah.
Yeah. So we and then also they would talk. There was a comment made about integrating the aviation assets.
Mm.
Not quite sure what that means. I suppose it does mean something like Airlink and those type of ones will be all put under the SAA brand.
I think we've seen many comments that we're pretty unsure what is meant by what he's stating. Consolidating contingency fund, it's just like there's no
Yeah, but to answer our fellow Facebookers' question, a lot was said about putting right people on the boards and trying to make sure that decision making's been well thought out, and then that Treasury would play a bigger oversight role.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to accept that. With all the state capture that's been happening, and they have been at the two biggest organizations where we've seen
Mm-hmm.
allegations of huge corruption is SAA and Eskom. So let's,
compared to a telecom asset which is really well run, good management team,
Yeah.
which are willing to sell a stake in order to fund something that maybe is not as well run.
Yeah.
Seems a bit controversial. So this was Minister Gigaba's first budget speech. It was the first midterm speech. How would you say how did he handle himself? Did he make some good points? Is he the man for the job? We've had changes of ministers, so many, I can't even remember. I think Pravin was the previous one. Then we got.
Well, then we had 4-day special.
Yes. So how would you say?
I think it's early days. Really, I don't think you can comment now. He's only been in the position, I don't even know, it's 5 months. So he's got to establish himself with Treasury, understand how SARs work, formulate his team. So I think it's still early days. He's been given a hard task. He's taken on a hard task. If you recall, when he took over, the rating agencies, Gordon had just sort of stabilized the ship. And now the rating agencies are now really going to be looking closely at us. So I think it may be early days. I don't want to comment that how he's currently doing. The midterm budget, as I said, it's not an exciting budget. It's just really, where are we, and are we still on the right road, and what immediate action do we need to take? I think the big test is going to be next year's February budget, the 2018-2019 budget. And I think we're going to see a lot more coming out of that. He's going to have to address this issue. Where is this revenue coming from? As a country, we just cannot afford to carry on borrowing. If you consider how Manuel, in his 10 years, brought the borrowing down right down to 40%. We're up at 50% and we're looking at going to 60%.
Yeah.
It's just, wow, guys, can't we do better?
Well, it seems to be linked to growth. I think we've got another question.
So it's whether we can expect an increase on the standard VAT rate due to the shortfall. Do we expect a VAT increase?
Look, I think we thrashed that one out. Most economists, tax practitioners, business people do believe that increasing VAT is possibly your easiest way to meet your shortfall. As you were saying, it was 1% would give you
20
billion. An increase, a 1% increase in VAT would give you 20 billion. So 2% is 40 billion. Or 50 billion, you're really close to it. Politically, I don't think we've got the willpower to do that. There's just too many forces out there that aren't going to allow it. And look, let's face facts. That will hurt the poorer people because their earnings are just such that an increase of 2 or 3% will have a major impact on those people. So I think that's where the issue is. So whilst from a person sitting in a lovely chair here, driving a lovely car and living in a house, I can maybe afford a 1 or 2% increase. For somebody that's living like 80 or 90% of our population in shacks, etc., it just might be one too hard to ask for.
I think it also stated we still have a 27.7 unemployment rate.
Sure.
That's quite excessive. So I think in the political environment we're in, I cannot see a VAT increase anytime soon.
Interesting, if you do increase the VAT rate, that means your social grant system is possibly going to have to be increased as well to cover that shortfall. So there is going to be a certain amount of increase will be eaten up just by purely supporting the people.
You get 20 billion in, but you've got to spend another 5 just to support the people.
Correct. So maybe a 2% might not be enough.
Yes.
Then we go to 3%.
Okay, then.
So in summary, I think it possibly is the right answer, but it's not going to happen. I just can't see it happening.
Yes, so that's from us at Mazars, Mike Teuchert, National Head, and myself, Tertius. Thanks for joining us as our coverage over the midterm budgetary policy statement. It was quite an interesting thing. Not much said, but also due to not much being said, a lot said. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to any comments that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.